Captain Olivia Reyes stood at the bridge of the Starfall, watching as the glittering lights of the galactic capital flickered across the viewport. The hum of the ship's engines was a comforting constant, but today, even that sound felt out of place. Her crew had been buzzing with rumors for weeks about a high-profile passenger, but nothing had prepared Olivia for the arrival of Princess Lyra of the Vantari Empire. A figure like Lyra, the heir to one of the most technologically advanced and politically powerful empires in the galaxy, was used to commanding attention wherever she went. Yet she had insisted, demanded, really, that her journey across the stars would take place only aboard a human ship. The Galactic Council had been thrown into a frenzy. There were speculations about the princess's motives, whether this was a diplomatic gesture, a form of rebellion, or simply a strange whim of royalty. To many, the Vantari Empire's aristocracy looked down on the primitive human species. Yet here Lyra was, making the audacious decision to travel on the Starfall, a low-tier cargo vessel with a mostly human crew, hardly fit for such a guest. Olivia had been summoned to the council chamber just yesterday. Their message had been direct: accept the princess, or suffer the consequences. She didn't have much choice in the matter. Still, the order rankled. Her ship was a simple freighter, not meant for luxury, and her crew was a rough-and-tumble mix of scavengers, former soldiers, and off-world traders. Nothing like the polished, highly trained staff that would typically accompany a royal visitor. As the crew got the news, they had been grumbling behind closed doors. What's a princess going to want with a human freighter? She'll probably expect us to bow or something. Olivia gripped the armrest of her captain's chair, her gaze locked on the comms panel as the docking signal flashed. All hands, prepare for docking, she ordered, her voice calm, though she could feel the tension building in her gut. This was going to be one hell of a journey. The hatch slid open with a hiss, and in stepped the princess. Lyra was taller than Olivia had imagined, with silver-blue skin and long black hair that shimmered like ink under starlight. Her eyes, bright, violet, glinted with an intelligence that immediately gave Olivia pause. She wore a simple white tunic, but there was no mistaking the quiet authority she exuded. Her presence filled the room. "I am Princess Lyra," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "I trust the accommodations aboard this ship are to my liking." Her tone wasn't arrogant, but it carried a weight that was hard to ignore. Olivia swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain composed. This was just another mission. She had faced more dangerous situations in her life than dealing with royalty, or at least she tried to convince herself of that. "Of course, Your Highness," Olivia replied, gesturing to the crew, who were all lined up for formal introduction. "Welcome aboard the Starfall." But as the princess stepped forward, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be just any simple transport mission. There was more to this journey than either of them knew. Introduces Princess Lyra and the crew's initial reactions to her presence, setting up intrigue about her motives and establishing Olivia as the pragmatic, no-nonsense captain. The tension between the human crew and the royal Vantari guest sets the stage for future interactions. Princess Lyra's presence aboard the Starfall didn't exactly go unnoticed, and Olivia could feel the uneasy stirrings among her crew as they shuffled about the ship. No one had expected royalty to arrive on their doorstep, much less a princess from an empire as powerful as the Vantari. Olivia stood at the command console, eyeing the security footage. Lyra was still in the galley, flanked by her guards, but it wasn't her entourage that concerned Olivia. It was the way Lyra held herself. The princess wasn't lounging in some luxurious suite or relishing the comforts of her status. No, she was sitting at a table with two of her guards, talking to Lieutenant Marcus Grant about the ship's engine configuration, asking detailed questions about the freighter's specs. "She's not what I expected," Marcus muttered over the comms, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and confusion. "She's interested in the engine cores, not exactly royal behavior." "She's a diplomat, Marcus," Olivia replied, though she was more curious than annoyed. "Probably sizing up the ship, figuring out what kind of resources we have, what we're capable of. This isn't some vacation for her. She doesn't seem to care much for her guards either, Marcus added. The whole royal thing doesn't suit her. She's different. Olivia was about to respond when the princess appeared in the doorway of the bridge. Her dark purple eyes locked on Olivia with an intensity that made the captain shift in her seat. She wasn't wearing the formal gown Olivia had expected, nor was she carrying the air of entitlement that seemed to follow most aristocrats. Instead, Lyra was dressed in a simple tunic, her silver blue skin gleaming softly in the light, her posture relaxed but alert. She looked, for all the galaxy's worth, like just another traveler, but there was a dangerous sharpness to her that Olivia couldn't quite shake. "You wanted to speak with me, Captain Reyes." Lyra's voice was calm, but the words lingered with an undercurrent of command. The Vantari were a proud people, and despite her unusual request to travel aboard a human vessel, it was clear she still expected to be treated with respect. "I did, Princess," Olivia replied, trying to maintain her professional composure. She gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Please, take a seat." Lyra approached with a grace that made the movement seem effortless. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap, eyes studying the various displays on the console as if she were appraising the ship itself. "I must admit," Lyra began, her voice soft, but laced with something almost imperceptible, "I've heard that humans are unremarkable when it comes to space travel. But I've seen your fleet at the capital. Your ships are unrefined, but effective." Her gaze flicked to Olivia. "You've surprised me so far, Captain." Olivia arched an eyebrow. "You were expecting us to be incompetent." The princess smirked, just for a moment. "No, but most of the galaxy underestimates your species. I find that interesting." There was something in her tone, something that made Olivia pause. It wasn't a compliment, but neither was it an insult. She knew that Lyra was choosing her words carefully, as if trying to gauge how much she could reveal. Whatever her reason for traveling with humans, it was far from simple. The silence between them stretched, and Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this mission, this passenger, was going to change everything. This continuation builds more tension between Captain Olivia and Princess Lyra, with Lyra showing unexpected curiosity and a degree of respect for human capabilities. The exchange reveals that Lyra is more than just a pampered royal. She's calculating, observing, and testing the crew in subtle ways. The theme of human underestimation is also teased, which will play a central role as the story unfolds. The Starfall had been in deep space for several days now, far beyond the reach of the galactic capital and its protective fleets. The silence of the void was only broken by the occasional hum of the ship's engines and the steady rhythm of the crew's routines. But despite the relative calm, there was an undercurrent of tension, an invisible thread tightening with every passing hour. Princess Lyra had settled into a strange sort of routine aboard the ship. She spent hours poring over the Starfall's operational data, asking questions about the ship's systems, and even offering suggestions for minor adjustments. The crew was starting to warm to her, albeit cautiously. Her knowledge of ship mechanics, the way she held herself when speaking to the officers, suggested that she wasn't as out of touch with the realities of space travel as a typical Vantari royal might be. But for every moment of mutual respect between Lyra and the crew, there were moments of discomfort, especially as the princess began to reveal more about her past. Late one evening, Olivia found herself on the bridge, reviewing navigation charts when Lyra entered, a serious expression on her face. She didn't approach Olivia directly but stood just beyond the threshold, her posture rigid. "The comms system," Lyra began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've intercepted a message from my family." She didn't wait for Olivia to respond, stepping forward as if she were about to confide a dark secret. "They know I'm missing." Olivia turned slowly, her attention fully on the princess now. "You think they'll come after you?" Lyra's eyes darkened, a brief flicker of vulnerability crossing her usually controlled features. "I don't think they will. No they will. There are factions within the Empire. Those who would rather see me dead than out of their control. Olivia's mind raced. Lyra had mentioned once that she had left the Vantari Empire in search of freedom, but she hadn't elaborated. Now it seemed that her escape wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was a desperate flight from a deadly political game. Before Olivia could respond, the ship's sensors pinged with an alert. A faint signature, barely detectable, appeared on the edge of their scanners. "Captain." Marcus Grant's voice crackled over the comms. "You need to see this. It's a ship, fast, and it's coming our way." Olivia glanced at Lyra. The princess's face was pale now, her expression a mixture of dread and resolve. "That's them," Lyra said quietly. "My family's hunters." Olivia's pulse quickened. The situation was spiraling out of control. The Starfall was no warship. Its weapons were basic, its shields only adequate. But the Vantari had far more firepower at their disposal. The crew was no match for a fleet of trained assassins, not without help. "You're not alone," Olivia said, her voice steady. "We'll protect you. Get to the crew deck and prepare for evasive maneuvers. We'll figure out how to deal with this." Lyra hesitated but then nodded, her royal composure slipping as she turned to leave. Before she did, she looked back at Olivia, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Captain, for not turning me away." Olivia watched her go, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in her chest. No one was going to stop the Vantari hunters, not unless they were willing to fight tooth and nail for their lives. The tension deepens as Lyra confides in Olivia about the danger she's running from, and an imminent threat emerges. The Starfall is now not just a vessel for a royal passenger, it's a target. Olivia's commitment to protecting Lyra sets the stage for a shift in their relationship, with the crew now involved in a much bigger conflict. The stakes have been raised, and the crew is faced with an unexpected decision. Do they run, or do they fight for the princess and themselves? The Starfall was flying blind, its sensors straining to pick up anything useful in the vast, empty space around them. The distant, cold stars blinked like distant eyes watching the ship's frantic movements. Olivia stood at the helm, gripping the controls with white-knuckled determination. The crew had been working non-stop since the alert went off. Everyone knew that the Vantari hunters weren't their only problem. Whatever the signal was, it wasn't just a search party, it was a trap. "Captain, we've lost the signal," Marcus reported from the sensor station, his voice tense. "We can't get a fix on it anymore. It's like they've..." A deafening crack interrupted his words, followed by a jolt that threw Olivia forward in her seat. The ship's warning system blared as emergency lights flickered on. The bridge was filled with the shrill sound of alarms. "We've been hit," Lieutenant Arya Hassan, the ship's weapons officer, shouted from the tactical console. "Hull integrity is at 75%. Olivia's heart sank as she quickly assessed the situation. The Vantari hunters, whoever they were, had either detected their ship or had been lying in wait, just out of sight. But as she scanned the readouts, something didn't make sense. The attack wasn't coming from Vantari ships at all. "Captain," Arya continued, "the attack is coming from pirates. They've locked onto our aft quarter. They're boarding us." "Pirates." Olivia's voice was low, the word feeling wrong coming from her lips. It didn't make sense. Pirate fleets didn't operate in this part of the galaxy, especially not in the Void where they'd encountered no official traffic for days. But then again, this wasn't any ordinary cargo ship. This was a Vantari princess's transport. The Starfall had become a prime target for anyone looking for a big score. "Lyra," Olivia snapped, tapping her comm. "Get to the crew deck now. We're under attack." Within moments, the princess was at her side, moving swiftly as though she had no intention of being a passive bystander. The tension in her posture was unmistakable, and Olivia saw a flash of something fierce in her eyes. "Where do you need me, Captain?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady for someone accustomed to the comforts of palace life. "You'll stay with me." Olivia replied, a sense of urgency pressing against her chest. We need to make sure the crew can hold off the boarders. Area, prepare the forward defenses. We need to make sure no one gets through those airlocks. Lyra glanced at Olivia, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were gauging the gravity of the situation. I'm not helpless. You'll need my help. The pirates. They're organized. This is a planned attack, not random. Olivia's gaze hardened. Then we fight. Together. The ship lurched again, this time more violently. The external shields were failing. Pirate ships were now visible on the scanners, multiple craft swarming around the starfall. There was no escape. There was only one choice. Fight. The bridge erupted into chaos as crew members scrambled to their stations, but Olivia felt a surge of clarity. This was their moment. They would hold the line. For Lyra, for the ship, and for humanity's place in this cold, ruthless galaxy. The attack by pirates serves as a pivotal moment, escalating the tension and turning the crew's routine journey into a life-or-death struggle. Olivia, Lyra, and the rest of the crew are forced into immediate action. The princess, who initially appeared out of place, now reveals her own knowledge and readiness, shifting the dynamic aboard the ship. The stakes are high, and both Lyra and Olivia must work together to survive the pirate assault. The battle raged as the starfall shook with each impact. The pirate ships had boarded, their heavily armed mercenaries now flooding the corridors of the freighter. Olivia and her crew were in the thick of it, fighting for their lives, but it was clear that they were outnumbered. Despite their best efforts, the pirates were gaining ground. Lyra stood at Olivia's side, an unlikely ally in the chaos. She was no longer the aloof royal that had first boarded the ship. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and she moved with a grace that belied the urgency of the situation. It was clear now that Lyra was more than just a passenger. She had training, and it was evident in how she coordinated with the crew. "Captain, I'm heading to the aft corridor," Lyra said quickly, her voice calm amid the chaos. "I know how to handle pirates." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Stay close. We'll handle it together." But Lyra shook her head, her gaze steely. "I've spent too much time in the courts, Captain. I've learned how to handle this kind of situation. You'll need my help." There was no time to argue. Olivia gave a terse nod, trusting the princess's resolve. "Make sure the secondary hull doors hold. We don't want them getting to the engine room." As Lyra disappeared into the ship's narrow passageways, Olivia's mind raced. She had known something was different about the princess since the moment she boarded. The cool, calculated way she handled the situation, her knowledge of tactics, and her ability to make decisions under pressure, it all pointed to something far more complex than the pampered royal she had first appeared to be. Meanwhile, the pirates were relentless. They had breached the lower decks and were pushing their way toward the command center. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she ordered Area to engage the external cannons, trying to buy them time. "Captain," Marcus's voice crackled through her earpiece, "we've got a problem. They've hacked into our comm systems. They're jamming all frequencies. We can't call for reinforcements." "Understood," Olivia responded grimly. "We'll have to handle it ourselves. Keep the boarding parties busy." Just then, Lyra reappeared, her expression unreadable. She had a blaster slung at her side, and her hands were smeared with a mix of grease and blood. "They're not just pirates," she said, her voice low but urgent. "This is a faction from the Vantari Empire. These aren't random mercenaries. They're hired guns. My family sent them." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "You're saying?" Lyra nodded, her eyes flashing with something dangerous. "I'm not just running from politics, Captain. My family's enemies want me dead, and they'll stop at nothing to ensure it happens. The pirates are a diversion." The revelation hit like a... Olivia stood at the forward command station, coordinating the last-ditch defense efforts. Pirates had overrun several sections of the ship, and the crew was locked in a brutal, close-quarters struggle to retake the corridors. Their resistance was fierce, but they were outmatched in numbers. And the Starfall was no warship. Every time the crew made progress, another pirate squadron would emerge, armed to the teeth with black market weaponry. Lyra had proven invaluable. She had led a team to secure the engine room, expertly overriding the internal security systems to block the pirates' access to the core. Her knowledge of technology, honed during years of court diplomacy, had translated seamlessly into battlefield tactics. No one had expected this level of capability from a princess. "I've got the aft hatch locked down," Lyra reported over the comm, her voice calm but authoritative. "There's a second wave coming through the lower docking bay. They're trying to board again." Olivia gritted her teeth, glaring at the incoming data. The pirates were relentless, but something about their assault felt off. It was too organized, too precise. The tactical patterns they used mirrored military maneuvers, not the usual chaotic disarray of pirates. "That's not just random piracy," Arya said as she joined Olivia at the tactical station. "These guys are trained, and it's not just the Vantari at play here. We've got something bigger going on." Before Olivia could respond, the Starfall lurched again, this time harder than before. The deck beneath them shuddered as the ship's shields flared, flickering ominously. Marcus's voice broke through the comms once more, his tone anxious. "Captain, we've got a major issue. Our sensors are detecting a massive fleet. Arctari ships. They're closing in fast, and they're armed to the teeth. It looks like they've been waiting for us." The word Arctari hit like a thunderclap. The Arctari were a warlike species, known for their ruthless tactics and vast fleet. They weren't pirates. They were a legitimate threat to any ship unlucky enough to encounter them. And they didn't just attack for profit. They attacked for power. And they never left witnesses. "Damn it," Olivia muttered. The pirates weren't the only threat. The Arctari were about to make the situation infinitely worse. "How much time do we have?" "Not long," Marcus replied. "They're within firing range. It's only a matter of time before they start shooting." Lyra's voice came through the comms, low but determined. "You need to take evasive maneuvers. Now, I can help you with that." Olivia hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to risk another attack on Lyra, but the princess had proven she was more than capable, and with the Arctari bearing down on them, they had no choice. "All right, let's do this." The Starfall bucked as another blast shook its hull, sending a violent shudder through the deck. Olivia could see the grim determination in Lyra's eyes as she took her place next to Arya at the tactical console. "Prepare to engage evasive protocols," Lyra said, her voice cold, calculating. "And Captain, whatever happens, trust me." For the first time since they'd met, Olivia didn't hesitate. "I'm trusting you, Princess." The Starfall veered sharply to port as Lyra executed a risky maneuver, and the pirate ships, now caught off guard by the sudden change in trajectory, scrambled to adjust their course. But even as the pirates reeled, the Arctari fleet remained a looming inevitable threat. The battle was far from over. The crew faces a new, even more dangerous threat. The arrival of the Arctari, a deadly warlike species, complicates an already dire situation. Lyra proves once again that she is no ordinary royal. Her tactical expertise is crucial in the ship's defense. The stakes rise as Olivia and her crew realize they are not just fighting pirates, but are now caught in a broader galactic conflict that could change the course of their mission and their lives. The Starfall was in freefall, barely keeping itself intact under the brutal onslaught of pirate fire and the relentless approach of the Arctari fleet. Olivia stood at the helm, her fingers flying over the controls, her mind racing with calculations. Every move she made was a gamble, a desperate attempt to keep the ship in one piece, to stay ahead of the attackers. The pirates were still boarding, but the Arctari were the true threat. They were far more dangerous, far more lethal. Lyra, standing beside Olivia at the tactical station, was a picture of focused intensity. Her hands moved across the controls with an uncanny ease, her every action designed to maximize the ship's survival chances. We can't outrun them, Captain, Lyra said, her voice steady as always. The Arcturi will track us no matter what. We need to fight. The Starfall was barely holding together. The ship's shields were down, its hull breaches worsening by the second. The pirate mercenaries were getting closer, and the Arcturi fleet was now less than a few light minutes away. Olivia's hands flew across the controls, trying desperately to stabilize the ship, but the odds of escaping intact were diminishing rapidly. Captain, Marcus's voice broke through the comms. We've got a ship. An ally, I think. They're breaking through the Arcturi blockade. Olivia blinked in surprise. An ally? What's the name of the ship? It's the Tempest, Captain. It's a Vantari rebel vessel, part of the faction Lyra mentioned. The words hit Olivia like a wave crashing over a cliff. Lyra had promised they could count on her allies, but she hadn't been able to confirm whether they would arrive in time. Now it seemed the resistance was making their move. Captain, we're being hailed. Aria's voice came over the comms. It's the Tempest. They're offering support, but they need us to disable the remaining pirate ships and hold the line. Olivia looked over at Lyra. The princess's face was set in a steely expression, the weight of her decision clear in her eyes. She had asked Olivia to trust her. And now, in their darkest hour, Lyra's allies were here. We've got one shot at this, Olivia said, turning back to the crew. We disable the pirates, and we don't stop fighting until that rebel fleet gets here. Prepare for a full-on counterattack. Lyra nodded, her voice low but resolute. I'll join you at the aft gunnery stations. Let's take the fight to them. Minutes felt like hours as the Starfall lurched, dodging and weaving through enemy fire. The rebel ship, Tempest, was now actively engaging the Arcturi fleet, its weapons cracking like thunder across the void. The pirate ships, caught in the crossfire, scrambled to adjust their tactics, but their numbers were thinning fast. Captain, the pirates are retreating, Aria reported. They're abandoning the ship. Looks like they didn't expect backup. Let them go, Olivia ordered, her voice a mix of relief and resolve. Focus fire on the Arcturi. We'll buy ourselves some time to escape. With Lyra's help, the crew of the Starfall managed to inflict critical damage to the remaining pirate vessels, sending them into retreat. The Arcturi, though still formidable, were now surrounded by the rebel fleet. The odds had shifted in their favor, and the Starfall had survived. As the battle outside the ship subsided, Olivia looked to Lyra, who was standing at her side, her eyes burning with the fierce determination that had carried her this far. You kept your promise, Olivia said, a rare smile tugging at her lips. I didn't think you'd pull it off. Lyra smirked, but her eyes held something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or a flicker of something personal. You didn't think I could. Olivia shrugged. Not at first. But now I know better. The Tempest hailed them again, confirming that the Arcturi had been neutralized and that they could safely make their way to the rebel stronghold. For the first time in days, Olivia allowed herself to relax, though she knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Lyra's escape had sparked a chain of events that would ripple across the galaxy, and their fight was far from over. But for now, they had survived. And that, Olivia realized, was enough. The final confrontation is a tense, fast-paced battle for survival, with Lyra's allies in the rebel faction coming through just in time to turn the tide. The pirates retreat, and the Arcturi are pushed back by the combined efforts of the Starfall and the rebel fleet. Olivia's trust in Lyra pays off, and the crew successfully defends the ship, though the larger galactic conflict is far from resolved. The story ends on a note of cautious optimism, with the crew having made it through this deadly encounter, but aware that much more lies ahead. Lyra's true importance and the gravity of her political role have been revealed, setting the stage for the future. Or if you'd like to explore further story ideas,